Show is brought to you by your local Toyota dealer and buyatoyota.com. The Toyota Tacoma comes in a range of models and trim lines, so you can choose the perfect Tacoma to reflect your unique personality and driving habits. Check out buyatoyota.com for deals on new Tacomas from your local Toyota dealer today. So here's the other thing that's going on today behind the scenes, is that we are attempting to bring back Zoom. It has been an experiment over the last couple of days. We've been running a lot of cords. We've been there's just been a lot going on.
Switching wires. And
we believe that we have it at a place where it can work. Although you have to unplug that microphone in order for it to work.
No, so I switched the pot that this microphone's in today. Yes. Yes.
A lot going on over there. So we believe that this is going to work, correct?
Yes, it will work. In fact.
I love your confidence. I appreciate that confidence. So when are you just going to tell me? You're just going to say, oh, we're good?
Yeah.
So joining us this morning, and I believe you can see him if you're with us on YouTube or Facebook. He is our buddy Connor Newcomb, Locked On Orioles, and he's with us here on GCR. Connor, we're nervous about this because we're sort of popping the cherry this way doing it. Can you hear me just fine?
I can hear you. I can see you. It seems like people can see me.
Look at this. What a good day today has proven to be. Well done, Griffin. Good work, pal. Connor, it's good to talk to you. I promised you that we would do this at a point where the Orioles weren't losing a bunch of baseball games. So, I kept my promise in that way, although last night was frustrating. I can't shake this. I get it. When we say, broad things like, well, you don't want to throw Felix Bautista's arm off or something like that, we all are in agreement. Nobody is debating that. I had 6 different people say to me last night, well, you can't expect a guy to throw 2 innings every time. No one thinks that's how they should use Felix Bautista. But I've got to have somebody explain to me why 9 pitches in one game and 18 pitches over the course of the week meant Felix Bautista couldn't go back out for a 10th inning.
Yeah, I think this one was probably sticking to the overall game plan a little too firmly. It's been brought up that Felix has not pitched in a spot like this at all since the Orioles called him up. He has not pitched in a spot where at home, tie game, he pitches the 9th to keep it tied. He has never come back and pitched the 10th in a tie game at home. Now, he's done it on the road when the Orioles have the lead. I kind of get the thinking. It's like, okay, if we're going to use him for 2 innings and burn him for the next day, we got to know that him getting 6 outs means we win. And at home, of course, it doesn't mean that. The Orioles could always not score in the 10th, go to the 11th. You got to go to Bauman anyway. Now, that makes sense if Felix throws 15, 20 pitches in the 9th. He threw 9. He could have theoretically thrown 15 more and still been fine for tonight. And the Orioles could have won that game. It is what it is. Again, he's never thrown an outing like that, and he still hasn't. I think that's like an overall plan of how we're going to keep him fresh. It bit him last night. It really did.
I keep hearing people talk to me about that, the road versus home thing, and I don't get that. I don't get the idea. I hear what you're saying. So what you're saying is if in the other scenario, if you're on the road and the Orioles don't score a run in the 10th inning, then they don't put Felix Bautista back out for the bottom of the 10th?
I do think that's how it's worked. I don't think the O's have had a scenario this year where Felix has pitched bottom 9 in a tie game on the road and they haven't taken the lead. Because what Brandon Hyde does is he knows Felix is such a strikeout artist that he plays for the 1 run in the top of the 10th.
Right.
He says, we can just get the 1,
right? Even
though we get the zombie runner. If we can just get the 1, Felix will strike out the side and we will win the game. And so I don't think there's even been a spot this year where he's had to make that decision. But I think if we, when the O's go on the road in a couple weeks, like maybe in say Arizona, if that spot comes up and they don't score in the top of the 10th, I would definitely be expecting to see a different reliever come out. The bottom of the 10th. I think it kind of goes both ways.
Tell me why I'm crazy, because doesn't it work the same way if you assume you're going to score 1 run because you're going to play for one run in the bottom of the 10th? Yes. Then wouldn't you expect that strikeout artist Felix Bautista would be able to get you some strikeouts in the top of the 10th and allow for that 1 run to win the game? What am I missing here?
I think this is where we're on the same page, because I would have thrown him last night in the 10th inning. I think it's like 95% the same. And I think the only thought is essentially, okay, you throw Felix Bautista 2 innings, he's not available the next night, right?
Right.
And sometimes he's not available for 2 nights, depending on how many pitches he throws. Mm-hmm. I think the thought is if we're going to throw him 2 innings, we need to be absolutely certain that we will win the game if we throw him 2 innings. Now, you can't be 100% certain, but I think that's just the one thing that makes it different is, the Blue Jays, for example, they saved Jordan Romano for the 10th.
Correct.
So even if Felix throws a scoreless top of the 10th, I mean, Romano's filthy. And so, maybe you don't score there and then you go to Baumann in the 11th. That could have been something that had to do with it. It's kind of silly when you play it out. Like, you're right. Like, it kind of feels silly, like, just go and win the game. I think I'm trying to assess why more so than defend it at this point.
Right, I get it. No, I get it.
Yeah, I think there's a reason why. I don't agree with it, but it is what it is. I mean, at least he pitched, but the 9 pitches thing. I think if he throws 20 pitches in the 9th, we're not having this conversation. But the fact that he threw 9, I think the Orioles stuck to the game plan a little too firmly and didn't change when he only threw 9 pitches.
Okay. I mean, like that. I can understand that. I just can't defend it. Exactly right. That's exactly where we are. I can listen to the thought process and say that's totally possible that was going on, but I can't say that I'm okay with it whatsoever. And again, this separates from all of the other blanket statements like, well, you don't want to throw Felix Bautista's arm off. Of course. You don't want him to throw to it. Of course. We are all in agreement about all of the broad statements. It's that last night and the uniqueness of that circumstance. And it's always the thing I go back to where you're trying to, like, well, you got to save him for the next night. Well, you have no idea what's going to happen the next night. Like, you have no clue. I think somebody brought this up about the Phillies series where, like, you can't put him in there because you need to have him available tomorrow. Well, you might not need him tomorrow. Like, there have been weeks where he has been barely used. I just don't know. I can't operate around, well, you're definitely going to need him the next 2 nights. I don't know that. I get it. The Orioles play a lot of close games, so there's a fair assumption to be made that he's going to be needed most days, but I can't operate that way.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just like hey, if we're going to throw him 2 innings, I think here's their game plan. If we're going to throw Felix a second inning, we want that second inning to be closing out a game, no matter what, and closing out a win. I think that's how they see it because, like, we want to know if we're going to burn him for tomorrow and potentially the next day, we need to know we're getting a win. And I think the difference is in a spot like last night, even if Felix comes out there and strikes out the side in the 10th inning, no guarantee of an Orioles win.
Sure.
So I think that's where the difference is. Again, I would have thrown him. Now, I would have thrown him because he threw 9 pitches. I wouldn't have just thrown him out there.
Right, 100%.
If there was any pitch count.
Right.
Specifically because it was 9 pitches, I would have thrown him. And it's a game plan thing. And I will say, Glenn, like, if that happened in a wild card series game, like, he's throwing the 10th inning. No matter what.
I get
that. I think
that.
it's also a workload thing. I
guess the next question becomes, like, if this is your philosophy, then should he have pitched the 9th inning, right? Like, like, I'm going to lay every layer of this together. There's no guarantee that you're going to win if he pitches in the 9th. Should you be saving him for the potential, like, at the bottom of the Blue Jays order coming up there in the 9th, should you be using someone else there with no runner on second base and keeping that bullet in your gun, knowing that if you end up losing and you don't fire it, you still have Felix Bautista for the next couple of nights?
I think that conversation is actually more interesting than the first one because the first one at least has an answer of, like, this is just the Orioles philosophy, whether you like it or not. This is kind of what they're doing this year. The 9th was interesting because it was 9-1-2, right, with nobody on. So even though you're facing 1 and 2, Whit Merrifield at the top of the order does not scare me like a guy like Bichette or Belt or Guerrero does. So you could have had a Mike Baumann at least face Kiermaier, Merrifield, and then just hope Bichette doesn't take him deep. And then if he gets into trouble, you could go to Felix. I think the only thing that kept them from using him there was that, okay, we don't use him in the 9th. But they had already used all of their trustworthy relievers, right? Like Cano, Webb, and Perez had already pitched. So instead, you're going Baumann in the 9th. And the way he threw last night, I mean, the O's might have just lost the game in the 9th inning anyway.
Right.
But that's also an interesting conversation because you'd rather have Felix, the strikeout artist, when there's a runner on second.
Correct.
Instead of when there's nobody on base. It makes it easier for Baumann. I think they were just in a weird spot last night, too, because they used Perez for 1 out.
Right.
And, the Blue Jays lineup doesn't give a lot of spots for Perez to be used. And then he was burned. And then you use Cano and you use Webb. And you're just kind of sitting there like, we don't trust Fuji. We don't really trust Vespi, and they put themselves in a tough spot if the philosophy was we're only using Felix for 1 inning here.
He is Connor Newcomb, Locked on Orioles. He is with us here on GCR. All right, so it's one baseball game. Let's move on to broader topics, right? Let's try to do it that way. Connor, the offense in general, right? Obviously, in Oakland, the offense comes to life significantly. But if you eliminate the Oakland series, they hadn't scored 5 runs in a game at all on the West Coast trip before that, and they didn't score 5 runs last night. And I'm not trying to make it so that 5 runs is the end-all, be-all, but I did start to wonder a little bit before the Oakland series if maybe this was a young team hitting a little bit of a wall, guys that haven't been in these situations before. I don't know. I don't want to be over-dramatic about it because I certainly don't think it's the more likely of their problems when they get to the postseason. But I don't know. Should there be any concern at all about the offense?
I think one thing that has really hurt them is Anthony Santander has not been performing and he's not been on the field. And I think that is kind of number one concern for the O's offense because he's in the 3-hole every single day. And when you're home run hitter, I mean, he's their top power hitter, I would say, at least until Mountcastle started to light the world on fire again. When that guy is not producing and now, he misses 4 games with a back injury, that can hurt your order. Now, I get that Santander wasn't injured before the Oakland series, but he wasn't hitting at all. Like, he has not been very good in the month of August. Ryan O'Hearn has not been the first half Ryan O'Hearn. I think that's hurt as well. Now, you don't want to rely everything on your offense on Ryan O'Hearn, who picked up off the scrap heap this offseason. But I think the offense looked solid last night. I mean, they had 9 hits. They just didn't come through in a couple of runners in scoring position spots, but they got to Kikuchi, got him out in the 5th, who's been pitching really, really well. They got base runners against the Blue Jays bullpen. They came back and tied the game. I mean, they had a chance to win it there in the 9th as well. I thought the offense looked better last night than it had kind of on that West Coast trip before Oakland. I think number one concern is you need a healthy and producing Santander back in the lineup right now.
I think that would be the biggest thing at this point that could give you some sort of boost. The other questions that people are asking is how should you use your extra roster spot when we get to September? I thought that the hullabaloo based on what John Heyman actually said was nonsense. I just don't see any world in which, to me, I have listened to arguments that people have made to me about, hey, look, if Jackson Holliday is one of your 13 best position players and you're playing meaningful games, he should be playing in those games. Like, I hear and I understand the thought process, but I just don't see it. I don't think it makes sense. I don't see a way that you can make a decision right now about this being the position that he's playing what say you about that possibility?
I think it would take a Gunnar Henderson injury for it to happen. I think if you had a Gunnar Henderson injury, you would call up Joey Ortiz, and then Jackson Holliday would be your 14th guy when the rosters expand. Because I don't know if you want to put Ortiz's bat in there every day. You certainly don't want to put Mateo's. So if, God forbid, that would be one of the worst things to happen to this team. Henderson went down. I think that would be the spot. Otherwise, I mean, he still hasn't reached AAA. I think the O's are going to want him there. It would be cool, right, if they found some spots to put him up there. But
let's ride, right? It's what I said. Like, if they do it, I'm not going to scream bloody murder about it. I'm going to say, let's go. But I just don't think it's the correct – on multiple levels, it's kind of spits in the face of everything that, the Orioles have said about how they handle this. It's a really weird decision. That being said, as much as I don't want to have to talk about the New York Times interview, I do wonder if the open admission that the Orioles probably have no intention of signing guys long term, if it does make you think a little bit more about what the window is for this team. And while a lot of people would say it's 5 years, if you're not signing guys, then you need to trade them when they have max value. And I'm not giving that a pass or saying it's acceptable or the way they should do business. It's just very matter of fact for me. If this is how you're going to do things, then to me, you need to trade guys after 3 years when they have as much value as possible in order to keep this window moving. Then that becomes a 3-year window. And suddenly, I don't know, maybe that does make me think a little bit more about whether or not you need to try to maximize this as much as possible and consider something extreme. I'm not saying I'm giving it a thumbs up, but I do think it's a factor for me.
I think that's a factor from the fan perspective and potentially like the Brandon Hyde and those guys' perspective. But actually, from the front office perspective, you could take it the other way and say, okay, if we're not going to extend any of these guys, then, we already have Adley. We have Gunnar here on these cheap deals. We have Westberg coming up. We have, these younger guys on the team now. Let's delay Holiday as long as we can. So his 7-year clock starts, close to when they're thinking about trading these other guys to get peak value. So that's the flip bad side part of this argument, is that part from John Angelo's maybe delays Holiday's promotion.
You're thinking about spreading it out more and having more. I don't know, man.
Hey, we're not going to re-sign anyone, so let's wait for Holiday until 2025 so we can get 7 years out of him and have him for a good amount when we trade Gunnar and Adley.
What's a sad conversation for us to be having. God, it's such a sad conversation, man. Oh, it's brutal. It's just utterly and completely brutal. I'm trying to do my best to kind of block all that out and not think about it in the moment. Would you bring up Kjerstad?
I would. I'm torn on whether he will be the extra man, the 14th man. I think right now it'll be Cowser getting another shot just because they've already brought him up and he's more defensively versatile, at least a better outfielder than Heston Kjerstad is. The one thing that would make me bring up Kjerstad is if Ryan O'Hearn really fell into a slump. I think you would need that kind of power-hitting left-handed bat who gets himself on base. O'Hearn's not slumping per se yet, but he's certainly not producing.
But if you add that in with Santander, right? If Santander doesn't snap out of this,
that's true. Yeah.
Right? Like I don't think Mountcastle can be expected to carry the load forever. Although I don't know, maybe he can. It's been a hell of a month. Right? Like because it was my thought too. Is like where are the at bats coming from? Well, right now I don't. How many guys definitively have to be getting at bats in this moment?
Adley, Gunnar, Santander. You would hope.
I hope.
Yeah, you would hope. And Cedric Mullins, you would hope. That's
right.
Kind of where we're at.
And more so, Cedric Mullins has to be playing center field every day. So because of that, he has to be getting at bats. Because I get it. Like the offense has been. Unfortunately, from where he was at the beginning of the season, it has not been right either time that he's returned. But, you have to have him in center field. You have to. You don't have a choice. He's got to be playing center field because of what he offers there. And that's where I am. So I don't know. The Kjerstad thing isn't crazy to me. I get the point that you make about Cowser, right? Like, he's been here. He's part of your plans. And there's still a more complicated conversation to be had about, like, if you think he's an everyday player next year, well, then who's going? Are you doing everything in your power to ship off Austin Hayes this offseason and see what you can get for him? Like, there's something else that you need to see there, but I don't know. I feel like they just might need to be one more bopper at this point if you can find one, and I don't know if Kjerstad can do that, but I'm willing to have the conversation. I guess when we started talking, I did not see that Jack Flaherty is not pitching tonight. Dean Kramer instead is going to get the start this evening, and they now have Thursday listed as TBA. So I don't know what's going on there. I've been saying it a lot, Connor. Like it's a bigger concern now about what's going on with Jack Flaherty. But every time Kyle Bradish or Grayson Rodriguez pitches well, I'm very excited. But I'm very excited. Like the macro versus micro is very difficult for me because I keep coming back to I don't know if these guys are going to be able to withstand all of this and still be pitching brilliantly into October, given what their limits are. And the guys that are mercenaries, the guys that we know have the innings in them, have been getting their asses kicked of late. And that, as while it doesn't matter long-term for the Orioles, to me, like anything that they could accomplish this season, it feels to me like it has to involve significantly better stuff from both Gibson and Flaherty because they're the guys that I know, and I said that not knowing what's going on right now with Flaherty, but they're the guys that otherwise I know have the innings in them for October.
Yeah, you kind of have to lean on those guys, right? And I think, Glenn, like who could be the saving grace, honestly, is Cole Irvin. Because you can lean on him for innings too. And he's been pitching much better than those two guys, so he might be the saving grace. I will say about the Flaherty thing, like we haven't heard anything besides they've scratched him. Dean Kramer will start. Kramer's still going to be on regular rest because obviously they're doing the six-man rotation, so it won't be too much of an issue. When you make that decision the day of, there's not a lot of times where it's not either an injury or some sort of situation where he has to be away from the team.
Yep.
So that's not like, you know what, let's give him an extra day. They would have decided that on Sunday or Monday. We're giving him an extra day. So that's a little concerning. Not that he's been amazing, but again, he's a guy who's thrown innings. He's a guy who's pitched in the playoffs. I would like to have him down the stretch in this rotation. So that's certainly something to monitor. But yeah, I mean, and might be the guy who has to, after all the turmoil of his season, kind of save this team down the stretch and save this rotation.
That's what a weird world. But you're right. I mean, it's certainly going to be a difference if he can continue to pitch well. All right, man. You want to remind everybody about Locked On Orioles?
Yeah, Locked On Orioles podcast. Get it wherever you get your pods. We're also on YouTube. We are 5 days a week. As long as John Angelos doesn't try to shut the whole thing down, we will continue producing Orioles content.
All right, buddy. Remind me, what about on Twitter? Where they can follow you and the podcast?
At Locked On Orioles on Twitter, at Connor Newcomb _ on Twitter as well. Again, until John Angelos tries to get me off the internet.
Thank you, Connor. Appreciate it, man. Let's do it again, all right?
Thank you.